Let's say that somebody believes that they have a moral obligation to eat like one hamburger a day. But every time they eat, let's say that that's their moral obligation, right? And we would say that them eating that hamburger every day, that's their right to do so. And it's morally good for them to do so. We should defend their right to do so, okay? Would it change how you view that eating of one hamburger every single day? Would it change the way you view that if every single time they ate a hamburger, a person was killed? Or would they still have the right to engage in that exact same behavior?
Look, in a situation where somebody else, just to be clear, is killing somebody else because I'm eating a hamburger, right? I'm not doing anything to kill that person. I'm just eating a hamburger. And you're saying that somebody out there who is watching me eat hamburgers
will kill somebody every time I eat the hamburger, yeah.
Right? Because I know that me taking an action is going to lead to somebody else doing something immoral. No, you cannot say, therefore, that I am morally obligated because of somebody else's immoral act to behave differently. No, I would behave differently. To be clear, I wouldn't eat the hamburger, but I have no moral obligation to put the hamburger down. You can't take somebody else's moral offense and say, therefore, Bastille, they have created a moral obligation for you.
What if it's a direct consequence? So what if imagine it's not a
if my hamburger is
independent.
If my hamburger is pulling the trigger on somebody somehow, then it's just like a gun, except it's a hamburger gun, I guess, right?
But I think what you're referencing is in causation in criminal law, oftentimes things that will break the causal chain are independent actions and of others, right? And so that's what you're imbuing here. But imagine that that's not there, and imagine that every time you eat that burger, there is some wave that affects someone and they instantly die of a heart attack, and you know about it.
Yeah, I don't. I think.
What if you're the proximate and but-for cause of a death by virtue of eating a hamburger?
I'd have to see the particular chain there, because I think that's like saying, well, okay, you're not. Oh, hold on a minute. Let me get this.
Sorry.
It's different than I gotta think of this for a second. It's like it's one thing, if you pull a trigger, right, and you fire a bullet, then you've clearly caused somebody to be killed. On the other hand, what if I'm somebody who advocates for a legal gun ownership, right? Have I pulled a trigger in the process of doing that? Well, I don't think so, right? It's possible to envision a society where we, where people, like I haven't caused an individual to kill somebody, but have I caused an individual to kill somebody by creating a society where there's more gun ownership? Well, I would say no, but maybe you would say yes. I don't know.
But
that's
the
situation I think now.
It sounds like
you're kind of leading out there.
It sounds like the systems that you propose exist completely independent of what their effects will be, such that a system could have completely horrible effects in society and mankind, and you would defend it against a system that has better results.
No, I would not defend it on its outcomes. I might, however, say that this terrible society we're imagining might be more moral in a sense, but I still would advocate for all these immoral things like say taxation and the IRS coming out and beating me in the face to take my tax money, because I think that would lead to better outcomes. But I think nevertheless, while I might view something as moral and immoral, I think that's still fundamentally separate from the consequences of the act.
Okay, it sounds like we've hit bedrock,
one other thing I want to bring up here. Just while we're on the subject of property, the person that Destiny talked to, what?
Can I ask you one quick question, just related to that before we go? Okay, so I would side with Bastia so long as that chain of events had some other moral agent embedded in the chain. So let's say every single time I ate a cheeseburger, a rock fell on somebody and killed them. I think that I would assume some level of moral responsibility for that. Whereas if every time I ate a cheeseburger, an assassin walked outside and killed somebody, I think that I'm free of the obligation there. Even if I know the outcome is even if I know the outcome is the exact same in both ways, I can't blame a rock because the rock isn't making a choice to kill anybody, whereas a human could do otherwise. And I think that person being an agent changes my action. Go ahead.
I think you're just failing to see. You're failing to see like internalize the consequence of your actions. And if I push you on this, I think it'll fall.
Go.
Imagine that every time you ate a burger, rather than one person die from an assassin, 1 million people die from an assassin. Does that change anything?
How could it?
So
how could it?
I think that. So I think that we. So I think
numbers change morality.
I think we run into an issue here. So there's a. I'm going to use this term. It's the only time I'm ever going to use it because it's a disgusting phrase. Okay. Have you ever heard of the expression threshold deontology?
No.
Okay. So typically, so from a normative framework, deontological analysis means that an action might be good by virtue of the action in and of itself, more or less, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, some people would argue that sure, you can be deontological, but there is a reasonable threshold here. For instance, you should never kill a person, just to, or you should never like tell a lie or something, right? You should never do anything harmful like that, right? But if I stack enough consequences on the other side, I can get you to basically agree.
That's just utilitarianism with other steps.
I understand. Okay, I don't want to argue about this because in some ways you might be true, but like I think all normative frameworks can theoretically collapse in other. But I don't have the educational background to prove. But it feels like that could be the case because did you present this to me, or have you listened to somebody say that like real utilitarianism is actually just act utilitarianism?
I've not heard those words in that precise order, but I think I know what it's going to be.
Sure, yeah. You can. It feels like you can collapse all normative frameworks together depending on how you do it, right? Because consequentialism says that we should all act kind of in certain ways, and deontologically has like universal fucking like accords. Yeah, but regardless of that, right? What I'm saying is that if I stack enough consequences on one side, it feels like I can get you to agree to literally almost.
Well, can
anything.
I? Well, that's. I mean, to be respectful, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to get you, but you didn't answer the question. Would that change your perception?
Yeah, there must be some threshold.
Okay.
Yeah, there must be.
So now you're just, I think you're just calculating consequences, and maybe 100,000 people dead that doesn't meet your threshold.
Well, but the threshold changes based on if there's another moral agent between me and the bad action.
Maybe it does, but does
no, absolutely does.
Well, you're also a determinist. Right?
Yes, but I'm a determinist if we're talking physics, but if we're talking morality, I'm a compatibilist. I want there to be a compatibility between determinism and free will, meaning that I will analyze different levels of choice that a person can exhibit and acknowledge that, sure, it might be like fully determined at the end of the day, but we can still have a meaningful discussion about the different levels of choice somebody can make.
So, that's more than fair enough, but it sounds like at bottom, okay, maybe you discount. There's some discount rate or some discounted that you do if there's a quote unquote independent action. Although in the case of self-defense, what wouldn't be an independent action? It's just like think about like tax policy. You've often said that tax policy is a way to get change, but tax policy, just like self-defense policy, is just working on people's incentives. You've said yourself that you can't just say change your behavior. You've criticized people like Ben Shapiro for doing that. So then what is this distinction we're doing? Policy is meant to change behavior. And if you're just going to collapse everything into independent action, then I don't think that fits with your framework of how you would view something like taxation policy.
I'd have to, that was a lot. I think we'd have to walk through that.
Sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. Go ahead.
One more time.
Can I try and collapse it? It seems to me like you're saying basically, Destiny, that when it comes down to it, the consequence dictates the underlying morality, and therefore it's a case-by-case thing rather than a consistent rule. You're saying, just to be clear, if you're saying that like one person, okay, the morality of that is different than 1 million people, well, maybe you're doing it perhaps more artfully than Vosh in the discussion yesterday, but it seems like it's not so different.
I'm saying that
isn't that just straight consequentialism then?
Well, no, hold on. I'm saying that within the same class of action, the consequence might change things, but that doesn't mean that all classes of action are the same. So, for instance, like if I can kill one person. Well, hold on. What was the original example we were doing? If I were to eat a hamburger and that would cause one person to die because a rock falls on them, I am the only, after my choice, there are no other moral agents between me and that action. So I'm like directly causing that. I eat something and a rock falls on them and they die. Now, if I eat somebody and somebody else is making the choice to kill someone, even if they inform me, they say, I'm going to kill somebody if you eat that cheeseburger. Right. And then I eat the cheeseburger and they go and kill somebody or whatever, right? There's another moral agent that's making that action. So that absolves me, I would say, of the responsibility of that, if that's not a consequence that I agree with.
So your knowledge of the consequence is irrelevant?
Sense.
My knowledge of the consequence is irrelevant insofar as there's a moral agent between me and that consequence, yes.
Really? Okay. So as long as you have enough stooges in between you, I mean, think about a lot of...
How could you say that?
Wait, wait, what's your example? Yeah, wait, I fully agree with that, 100%. Yes, of course. If there are moral agents between me and that other decision, and I disagrure with that outcome, and I wouldn't advocate for it, and somebody decides to do it anyway, I don't believe that I should be held responsible for that moral
agency. Haven't you said that people behave predictably to incentives?
Sure.
Okay, so... given that you are setting out some level of incentives in whatever your self-defense policy is going to be,
Okay, okay, I understand where you're going with this. This is going to get really complicated. So, to spin up an example, let's say that I go to eat a cheeseburger, but I know that when I do that, someone else is going to kill somebody because by eating that cheeseburger, I'm going to make them starve to death, and they've got to go out and kill another person in order to do it. Well, now I know the consequence. I know the outcome. People respond predictably, right? At that point, okay, this is going to get really complicated. I'm looking at the last stop for who has agency in any given decision. I don't know if I would say the person at the end of this is meaningfully making a choice because they're doing something that determines whether they live or die. I would say that last person has been robbed of agency. Therefore, you're the one that has the responsibility now. There's no more flow through agency there. That would be what I...
Say it one more time. So if you have knowledge of the consequence, there's no pass-through agency.
So I would say that if you do something, because you were giving me the idea that like, well, people respond predictably, right? So the example, so the implication you're going to give me here is that I'm going to do some action and someone else basically has no choice but to follow through with a negative action. At that point, I would say, well, that person has essentially become a rock. They have no agency at that point. It sounds like we're taking their agency away to make a choice. They're going to do something every time.
Right? There's always uncertainty, and imagine that all it does is increase. The law of big numbers, of course, and if your policy affects enough people, even though there's, I guess, some nominal uncertainty, that it's predictably some amount of people are going to. For instance, we know, that 20,000 plus people die every year because of car accidents, because we have cars on the road. We can say that a lot of those are due to independent actions, but it's a function of a societal policy that we have,
of course,
and it's pretty consistent. Yeah. And so, does the mere fact of some uncertainty change at all your moral conclusions?
No, I think I don't think that the difference is I don't think we necessarily blame society for the deaths of those people driving because we would consider every individual accident had like moral agents behind it, right?
So what if you had what would you
wait, real quick, as a direct example of this, if I get into a car crash, I could never get in front of a judge and go, well, you see, actually, in society, we all made a wager with each other that some amount of people would die by virtue of driving cars, so I'm absolved of all responsibility. Instead, the judge would say, well, hold on, you were the person that made this decision. You're the last agent here. Even if somebody before you made a decision that we know would probabilistically cause people to die, you're still going to take responsibility for that death.
That is true, although keep in mind that whole sentencing and that whole litigation is part of the system, in essence, that we've created. And so I agree with you that those systems individual culpability needs to exist as a function of having our system.
But is that fair? Why would we hold somebody? Let's say
fair
that.
Mean?
Well, I'm asking you. So let's say, because you're making it sound like in this case. In some ways, you're making it sound like you need to accept full responsibility if you know the consequences of an action, and it's not fair to offshore that or offload that onto an agent past you. Let's say as a society, we decide we're going to have cars, and by making that decision, we know that I think it's 60,000 people or whatever die a year of car accidents. We know that's going to happen. Well, is it fair that we punish individuals that get into car accidents, even if it's a DUI, even if it's anything? We know that by virtue of implementing that policy, we know that there's going to be some people that will get into accidents and kill people. Well, why are they taking the responsibility for that when we've already made that choice?
The answer is you assess each actor's culpability individually. And so, yes, you can assign a certain amount of blame to the person who assassinated someone as a result of your hamburger eating, just like you can assign the drunk driver some level of culpability. But policymakers need to fully internalize the costs of their policies without cover from other agents who should be punished, but who are going to behave predictably.
I understand that, but I would argue that from a policy point of view, I don't think that we as a society, from a policy point of view or from a feeling point of view, feeling is kind of weird, emotionally, I don't think that we accept that all of us share some responsibility every time a drunk driver kills somebody. I think that we offload that agency onto them 100%. The same way that if I were to eat a cheeseburger and someone were to kill somebody afterwards, even if I was informed of that, I would offload the morality of that onto the moral agent making the choice. I would say, well, hold on, no. Even though I know the consequence of me eating this cheeseburger, the same way we know the consequence of allowing people to drive cars, we are still going to assign 100% of the weight on the assassin that kills somebody after I eat the cheeseburger, or for a person that chooses to drive drunk. We're not going to assume their agency just because we're putting them in a situation where they might make that choice.